Hi guys. So this next video we're gonna look at tonight is we're gonna look at the last section of this chapter. So this is chapter 2, section 4, and we're gonna look at why some regions face health threats. Right now I have an orange cat, a black cat, and a little black dog. So they're all calm. Hopefully nobody's gonna lose it. There won't be a cat-dog fight. So hopefully they'll all be okay. Okay, so we're going to look at why some regions face health threats. And we're going to look at all the different stages of, let me see what they refer to that as. I guess epidemiological transition. Yeah. Epidemiological transition. So epidemiological transition, medical researchers have identified an epidemiological transition that focuses on distinct health threats in each stage of the demographic transition. In epidemiology, oh no, start yawning. Okay, this is a branch of science that studies diseases. So stage 1, this is the stage that focuses on, this is the stage that deals with pestilence and famine. And they're going to have a high crude death rate. So their principal causes of death are going to be infectious and parasitic diseases. And we're talking like really bad diseases like the Black Plague. Bad, like, I mean, Black Plague, like kills half of the population. So really bad diseases. Then our next stage is a receding pandemic. So this is a pandemic, diseases that are starting to go away. So this is a rapidly declining crude death rate. So a pandemic is a disease that occurs over a wide geographic area and affects a very high proportion of the population. And factors that reduce spread of disease during the Industrial Revolution were that we have improved sanitation, improved nutrition, and improved medicine. So, as people are becoming urbanized, as people are moving into cities, they're going to have better sanitation because they're going to have more access to water. They're going to have more access to bathrooms. They're going to have access to more food options, and they're going to have access to doctors, thus better medicine. And then the book gives you that same cholera pandemic that we looked at in the other book in the first, I think the very first reading we did, that cholera pandemic in London with Dr. Snow and how he figured out that it was the one pump in town. I'm so sorry. Okay, then how he figured it was the one pump in town that was where the cholera was coming from. Okay. Oh, it even tells you that you can look on page 42 and see that particular pump, which is kind of interesting that it's still there and you can like go visit it. Okay, so stage 3 is degenerative diseases, and this is a moderately declining crude death rate. This is going to be a decrease in deaths from infectious diseases. So always, every night. I know, I just need to like let it happen. Cancel. Oh, it's because we're doing it daily. How about if we do this monthly? Do it. Not right now. And where's my PowerPoint? Okay. So we have a decrease in deaths from infectious diseases. So it's not so much about, diseases like cholera or smallpox or things that people spread to each other, but it's more about chronic diseases. These are diseases associated with aging. So in stage 3, it's more about diseases you get due to longevity. Also, think about these diseases because of um, the types of situations these parts of the world, these, you know, these countries in these parts of the world are in. So we have cardiovascular diseases, so those that affect your heart, and then we have cancer, um, those that people are going to be facing due to the effects of um, things you're exposed to. So, stage 4, we have delayed degenerative diseases. So we have a low but increasing crude death rate, and it's a low but increasing crude death rate because people are going to be living longer. So in stage 4, we have deaths caused by cardiovascular disease, so again, heart problems and cancer that are going to be delayed because of modern medicine treatments, but they still exist, and they're going to be um, increasing that crude death rate because there's a higher population of elderly people in that stage. So this map shows us the male cancer rates, the male cancer death rates um, in parts of the world. It's kind of a morbid map, but we see that it's, you know, it actually affects very developed countries, more developed countries, um, because as people live longer, they kind of actually have that opportunity to be affected by cancer. It's a bizarre way to look at it. Okay, and then if we again look at the percentage of people who are obese. So you notice that, again, in developed countries, we have people that are more obese. Okay, so then there are these possibilities of um, stage 5 existing. So stage 5 could possibly exist for a number of reasons. First of all, due to evolution, infectious diseases um, could be kind of re-emerging in certain countries because things like antibiotics or different chemicals that used to be able to kill um, microbes and other strains, like for example, DDT, which used to be used for mosquitoes, which are what spread malaria. Um, isn't used as much anymore because we know that it's not good for people and it causes cancer. But additionally, mosquitoes have now become more resistant to the basic forms of DDT. So, because of evolution, um, we have possibility of stage 5. Then we have poverty. Infectious diseases are more prevalent in poor areas because of the presence of unsanitary conditions. So, where people are very, very poor, we have extremely unsanitary conditions. Um, Sorry, trout yawned. It made me yawn. Um, and people are unable to afford drugs needed for treatment. If you guys read City of Hope, I think Shelby the only one who read City of Hope. That's a shame. Such a good book. No, somebody else told me they read it too. Okay, anyway, such a good book, but it just talks about the extreme poverty in Calcutta and how very, very unsanitary it is there. You know, they almost have, I guess a latrine is the best way to describe the bathroom situation. And then when the monsoons come, it's just like filth everywhere. And then I mean, there's no medicine. It's amazing. There's like none. So that would be a situation of stage 5. And then we have increased connections. So advancements in modes of transportation, air travel, and that causes it to be easier for people to be infected. Um, and someone gets infected, they go to immediate, they leave another country before they even show their symptoms. And um, a really easy way for us to have seen this last year was with Ebola, and that was really um, obvious how people were leaving um, the western coast of Africa, coming to the United States. And I think when we have 8 cases of Ebola, but that seems to have been all taken care of, which is excellent. Okay, so this shows us how a disease prior to Ebola, prior to um, the swine flu, prior to the avian flu, um, how AIDS first happened in the same way, where people were infected and then came. And so what we're seeing here is that when people came to the United States infected by AIDS, um, they were flying into major airports, and thus, when AIDS was first spread, it hit in areas with major international airports, which is pretty amazing how geography shows us um, epidemiologically how things happen as well. Okay, so health conditions vary around the world primarily because countries possess different resources to care for people who are sick. So we have expenditures on healthcare, more than 15% of total government expenditures in Europe and North America, however, less than 5% in sub-Saharan Africa and South Asia. In developed countries, public service is available at little or no cost. And the government pays more than 70% of healthcare costs in most European countries, and private individuals pay about 30% of the expense. And in developing countries, private individuals must pay more than half of the cost of healthcare. So this tells us that the U.S. is an exception to these generalizations because private individuals are required to pay about 55% of healthcare costs, making it more closely resemble a developing country in regards to healthcare. So with the advent of the Affordable Care Act, I'm going to say that this is going to be different now. I do not think that we are going to be quite up to the level of European countries now, but we're definitely going to be a bit higher up than we were at the time that this book was published um, 2 years ago. So that's definitely a step. To say that the United States was in the ranks of developing countries in the way that people were protected um, in regards to healthcare, whereas in most developed countries, the government takes care of healthcare. I think is a pretty major statement. So to say that that's a step in the right direction is really huge. So this shows healthcare expenditures per capita, and if you look at healthcare, you can see that definitely in the West, so in Europe, the United States, and in trying to see if Australia is the same color, it's the same dark color, if it's the medium color. I think it's the dark color. There's $1,000 and above of healthcare expenditures per capita, which is huge. There's a really interesting John Green talk about healthcare, if you're interested in that. It was before the Affordable Care Act was put into place, but it definitely gives you an interesting perspective on how healthcare is provided in other parts of the world and how it's different from what goes on in the United States. It's pretty eye-opening how costs are different. For those of you who aren't aware that the United States is pretty different than how the rest of the world is. This shows us government expenditure on healthcare as a percentage of total government expenditures. And this is hospital beds per 10,000 people. Physicians per 10,000 people. Private expenditure as percent of total expenditure on health. So you can definitely see the difference. The United people in the United States are spending a lot more money on private expenditure than, for example, people in Europe. And look at Scandinavia, how much lower it is there. And then notice in Canada, it's lower there. Now, again, this is before the Affordable Care Act was put into place. And the Affordable Care Act, remember, does not um, affect everyone. For example, I still have um, like regular insurance, which I had, you know, last year or the year before. But, you know, I have friends who have Connect, which is Kentucky's version of the Affordable Care Act, and it's insurance that they wouldn't have had 2 or 3 years ago. Okay, and so we'll get to the summary when we finish the other two sections in this chapter.